Good afternoon, my YouTube friends. It's Margaret here from M.E.s Orchids, and I'm in the hallway. And I'd just like to thank all my new subscribers for joining me on my orchid journey. Although this isn't an orchid we're looking at, of course. This is a Christmas cactus. And it's in full bloom. As mentioned in one of my earlier videos, this was a little cutting no larger than this one that I once liberated when we were visiting Scotland a few years ago, that was now. And that was another little cutting there that I took off this original one, and that's flowering as well. I've got one of the little tiny cymbidiums here. This is the one that came from Madeira, and this is going to stay here, and I'll show you in a short while what I've done with the other ones. And this is the desert rose, and this one of course shed all its leaves and put me in panic stations, but you'll see the new little tips that are coming, so that'll stay there for the winter. We're actually in Keith's room now, and that'll give you a clue as to where we're off to. We're going to follow the snowbirds, and we're all ready now. And we're in the orchid room. It's always a dilemma when you're going on holiday, what to do. Whether you should get somebody to come in and check your orchids, whether you should ask them to water the orchids. And well, the decision that I come to is that fortunately we are able to take a winter holiday, and my orchids have to fend for themselves. And during the last few months I've managed to clear all the bugs, and so they're all quite healthy now. I'm in the process today of watering them, those that need to be watered. Some, of course, the noblies, they're already started on their reduction in water. And these are the frags. They're in trays, and the tray at the back are the other two frags, and you'll see that tray, that's got some underlay. And that's a suggestion that Wade of Wade's Orchids gave us. Maybe last year, I think it was, for people who want to go away and are worried about leaving things. So that will be filled with rainwater, and the frags then, will stay moist. So that's one of my problems solved about these, the frags and the paths. And also I've got the Chlorophthalus here as well. And watching a recent YouTube video, Wade suggested having sphagnum moss, because these are cool growers. That where I'm pointing now, that's a little Paphiopedilum that I'm trying to save. That's a little cutting here that fell off, so that's just in that little pot. But these are cool growers, and so I've just placed them in a tray of sphagnum moss, which will at least keep them cool. I don't have to worry at all about the Phalaenopsis, because they will get watered, and they will be all right for the duration of our holiday. On the windowsill here, now we're only single glazed here, so that means that when we do get severe weather, these that are on the windowsill here will get a real good chill. They won't freeze because they won't be straight up against that glass, and we have got a canopy that comes, I don't know whether you can see that canopy, it comes across, and so we don't actually get the penetrating frost actually on the glass here. If I come over here now and just take up on this top row here, these are of course the Cattleyas, and that's my Laelia. One of the things I've done now, the last couple of days, just in readiness, is to get these orchids adapted to not having the artificial light. So this is the light, and it's a really dull, well, it's gone dull now. We did have some earlier sunshine, but they've got to get used to the shorter days, and by getting used to the shorter days, of course, they don't need as much moisture watering, and so I should be able to go on holiday and really enjoy my holiday. So let's have a look. Now, I did an earlier video which unfortunately I messed up, and it was 21 earlier, but now you see that's 19 and the humidity is 54. We will leave heating on just to so it doesn't kick in for the freezing, but that you know, the orchids are going to be on their own, and they will just have to fend for themselves. The Bulbophyllum lobii, you'll see this one has got a nice growth here, and this one's got a little growth there, and we're actually having a ready prepared meal the other day. It was a Thai meal, and they came in these little containers here, and they have a little divider there. Oh, and I said to Keith, "Oh, don't throw those away." I said, "I can use them for my orchids." And he gave me a raised eyebrow as if to say, "Oh, not another container for orchids." And so what I've done is I've put hydrogen balls in the bottom. They've got this little piece of plastic which has got holes in. There's a sphagnum moss and some orchiata bark, and again this is the underlay. So I shall be, you know, filling this reservoir here, and that'll enable them to be hydrated, and there'll be enough humidity around there. So I'm really chuffed about that. And let's have a look up there. By reducing the water and the light reducing, the orchids will naturally slow down, and so they will not need, you know, the same water as having the supplemental light on and the central heating on all day. So I really, I don't think I shall have any worry at all. So a few weeks ago I was tagged, and we all know what the questions are, but I'll just quickly run through them for you. What part of the world do you grow your orchids in? Well, I live in England, and I live in the northwest of England at a place called Crewe. And Crewe's famous for the Bentley motor cars, and although I've only lived in Crewe 27 years, it has also the reputation for building the coaches for trains, but I don't think it's quite as productive in that line anymore. But the Bentley motors are still here, and the majority of the people who live here, you know, find employment at the Bentley motors. And so it's, how long have you been growing orchids, and can you remember which was your first one? Well, I've been growing orchids since about 2014. And this one here was the first one that Keith bought me. I think it was for one of the Christmas 2014 Christmas, and it's the Dendrobium Comet King. And so that was the first one that got me into the orchid growing. And if I gently just take you across here slowly without, of course, making you dizzy. I also had some Phalaenopsis orchids, and this one is the only one left from the those early orchids that I had, because this one had got crown rot. And as you can see, that was the crown rot. That's the original one. And since then, it has grown this new keiki. I don't think it's actually bloomed for me since, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that, you know, maybe next year it might give me a bloom. And then it says, it asks what kind of growing space to grow your orchids in. Well, as you all know, this is the third bedroom. It's only a small bedroom, you know, and I've converted it, well, my husband did, into this grow room for the orchids, because this window faces south. And even though we're only single glazed, you know, the orchids are fine in here. And where else do I grow orchids in the house? Well, I'd grow them everywhere if my husband let me. And they're in the hallway, they're in the living room windowsill. We've got a bay window there. They're in the dining room. And the cymbidiums at the moment are in the garage. How many different genera do you have? Well, I think I've got about 14. I've got the Den Williamsii, Den Thisithrorum, Den King Zip Red Splash, I've got the Den Kingianum, I've got Pleurathalis, I've got Aspasia, I've got Angraecum sesquistigale, I've got Olcoglossum, I've got Coleogenes, I've got an Oncidium Powii, I've got a Phragmipedium, I've got a Pathiopedilum, I've got Phalaenopsis hybrids as well as species, I've got Cattleyas, I've got Lalias, I've got Bulbophyllums, I've got Bifrenara, and the one up here, which I can never say, let's have a look. Xylobium sesquillans or something like that. It's one of those that you can never pronounce. And let's see what the next question says. Do you actually know how many orchids you've got? Well, Keith did a count when I cleaned the room out and decided to change things around. And, you know, he says, do you know how many orchids you've got? You've got 103. So I didn't realise I'd got that many, but never mind. 103 it is at the moment. I'm sure next year it'll be 104 and perhaps even more. And what would be the one thing, the orchid gripe or peeve? Well, sorry about that. I suppose the only orchid gripe or peeve that I do have is regarding the eBay sellers. And why do I have a peeve about them? Well, sometimes I don't think they're always as honest as they can be. You know, especially when you're a newbie to orchids, in your enthusiasm, you want to purchase everything that moves. And sometimes the orchids that they send you are either ones that they want to get rid of because they're actually no good at all, or they're very poor specimens, and I think that's very cruel. You know, especially when you're a new beginner to orchids, you need as much help as you can. You don't need somebody sending you orchids that are going to die straight away. And what would be your favourite places to buy orchids? Well, earlier on, we had, I think it was the Cymbidium from M.E.s. I don't think they're actually in existence anymore, which is a shame. So we've got Burnham Nurseries, and the other one that I usually buy from is Curly and Orchidine in Germany. And what's the worst orchid advice you've been given? Well, I don't take advice. It's one of those orchids is one of those areas where there's been a lot of trends, and unfortunately we all seem to follow the trends, especially when when you're a newbie. And I suppose I did follow some of the trends, but then as I've gleaned more experience, I now realise what actually suits my environment and what works best for me. The next question is, out of the orchids you own, which are your 5 favourites? Well, all the orchids are my favourites. I can't just actually, put one aside and say that's my absolute favourite. I mean, this big white phal here, that's been flowering now since February. Can you just see it's just going over? So probably when we come back from holiday, these blooms will be gone. But I like all the orchids. I just can't separate one out to say that's that particular one. But I like them all. The next question was, have you got an orchid story to tell? Well, not really, I suppose. I had a compliment a few weeks back from a gentleman who made a comment on one of my posts, and I really chuckled because he said he was giving me the thumbs up because he said, the older people on YouTube, he said, he thought was very good because, a lot of older people shy away from technology and going on YouTube. And, I suppose we all worry about making a fool of ourselves. And of course it was the 60-minute tag that got me into it from William of My Green Pets, and I just thought it was a nice compliment that this gentleman gave me. And the last question is, of course, what advice would you give to anybody starting out on this orchid adventure? And I would say to them, well, why not? It's very rewarding, and it can be very expensive. Some of the plants aren't cheap, but and it takes a lot of effort to save some of them. They're not easy, especially the species ones, and of course you've got to contend with the bugs. And as you all know, I've had to contend with scale this year, which I wouldn't wish on anybody's worst enemy, because scale has been my absolute bane. But go for it, do your research and take your time and just enjoy the orchid journey. So I'll just give you a quick pan round now, and this is all at the moment till after our holidays, and I'll bid you farewell. Thanks for joining me, thanks to all the new subscribers, and take care. Bye bye now.